Hello everybody, today I'm going to talk about nerve cells and I will specify motor neurons specifically because I will talk about muscle contraction in my next lesson. So first I would like you to know what are neurons. Neurons are, or nerve cells, what are they? They are responsible for transmitting signals from the exterior environment to the spinal cord and brain and from one cell to another within the brain. And vice versa, it also transmits signals from the brain and spinal cord to the other parts of the body. And the nerve is usually charged, even if it is in its resting potential or in its action potential state. So here you will recognize that we have three types of neurons. We have sensory neuron, motor neuron, and interneuron. So I will talk today about motor neuron. Here we will recognize the anatomy of the neurons. They all have a cell body and dendrites. And here is the axon, where it is covered with myelinated sheath. And this myelinated sheath is called Schwann cells. And we could recognize that the axon could be 1 meter's length, specifically in the axon that controls the muscle movement in our legs and feet. Okay, and here are the terminal ends which are attached to the muscle itself. Okay, so here you could recognize the Schwann cell or the myelinated sheath. Here they are composed of lipid layers and they increase the resistance in this area. So when nerve impulse passes through the axon, it passes very fast through the myelinated sheath. Okay. And here I will talk about nerve impulse. How is the signal could transmit. They could transmit through the nerve impulse. So first I would like you to know what is the resting potential and what is the action potential. In the normal state of the cell, the nerve cell carries inside of the cell it carries negative charge, it is minus 70 millivolt, and outside of the cell it carries positive charge, it is plus 40 millivolt. They measured that by using microelectrodes. So here you could recognize here this axon. Here they magnify this part. Okay, so you could recognize this is the inside of the cell in the resting state of the neuron. It carries negative charge from the inside of the cell and positive charge from the outside of the cell. And here action potential to occur, this happens when there is a disturbance in the cell membrane. This disturbance could occur when you got suddenly exposed to any hot object, okay, or you could hear a loud sound suddenly. So these are external things that could create these stimuli. So when you got exposed to those things, okay, the action potential happens because there is influx and efflux of sodium and potassium within the cell membrane here, and they change the positivity and negativity of the cell membrane. So here you could find that here it passes here and it becomes positive inside and negative outside, okay, which is the action potential. And the action potential transmits these signals through one direction, okay, so it passes along the nerve here in only one direction. Here the ions that are responsible for this action potential are the sodium and potassium ion. So we will recognize that there are three sodium ions which move from the inside of the cell to the outside, and we have two potassium ions which move from the outside of the cell to the inside. And this process needs ATP. So they pass through the sodium potassium pump because the sodium potassium pump here is a protein pump which carries ATP as a source of energy, and they need energy because they travel against the concentration gradient. So for this reason ATP split and give or hydrolyze and give ADP and phosphorus. So here in this picture we could recognize that potassium ion are in green here and the sodium ion are in pink. So here is a sodium potassium pump. So we could recognize that we have 3 molecules of sodium here are attached here in this site, okay, and then the ATP function and hydrolyze to give ATP and phosphorus, and the sodium potassium pump then change its configuration and open in the other direction, okay. So that, and then this process causes the release of sodium ion from the inside of the cell to the outside, as you see here. And then this part got a high affinity to the potassium ion, and then potassium ion will attach to it, and ATP will split to ATP and phosphorus, and the sodium potassium pump will change its configuration or open in the other direction, as you see here, okay. So this process causes the action potential. This is in the normal state. This is not in the action potential. This is in the normal state. So as a result, you could find that there are more sodium ion outside in the exterior of the cell. So it carries positive charge, more positivity, and inside of the cell it carries potassium ion, but only 2 potassium ion, okay, compared with the 3 sodium ion outside. So inside of the cell it carries negative charge. It is minus 70 millivolt, as I mentioned before. But when we got any stimuli, external stimuli, so here the cell membrane change, okay, there is a disturbance happens here in the cell membrane. So we have 2 gates here. We have sodium gate and potassium gate. We recognize in the normal state there is neither sodium nor potassium could pass in the other direction, okay. But when disturbance happen in the cell membrane, according to being exposed to any stimuli, external stimuli, sudden stimuli, like suddenly being exposed to a hot object, okay, as I told you before. So then there is disturbance happens, and it causes influx of the sodium to the inside of the cell and efflux of potassium to the outside of the cell. As a result, we could obtain change in the voltage, okay. So inside become now more positive than the outside. It becomes plus 40 millivolt, and outside becomes minus 70 millivolt. For this reason, the action potential occurs. So what happens in action potential? As I told before, now we have a positive charge inside of the cell become more positive than outside of the cell, and this travel along the nerve in only one direction. Yes, here this demonstrated again. We could recognize here this is the normal state. This is in resting potential. The negative charge is within the cell, and outside of the cell it carries positive charge. But here sodium will pass inside of the cell where influx into inside of the cell with influx. That means going from the outside to the inside, and then the potassium will efflux out of the cell. This process occurs through the sodium potassium gate, not through the sodium potassium pump, okay. So this process doesn't need energy because that happens only because they got a sudden stimuli, and this stimuli will pass here along the nerve in only one direction, as you see here, okay. So now I would like to talk about calcium. Why? Because calcium is the main reason for muscle contraction. So how calcium is released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum? What is the sarcoplasmic reticulum? The sarcoplasmic reticulum is the endoplasmic reticulum within the muscle. So what is the endoplasmic reticulum? It is the place where calcium is stored. So that means the sarcoplasmic reticulum is the place where calcium is stored within the muscle cell. So when the muscle receives any electric signals, it passes down through the nerve, and then the motor nerve here, and then this action potential travels down the motor nerve, and at the end of the nerve there are synaptic vesicles. This synaptic vesicle contains acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter. Yes, here this is picture shows that, okay, it shows that this is a nerve, and when we have signals that pass through the nerve, okay, so this cause an action potential happens, okay, so this causes the release of the acetylcholine from the synaptic vesicles, and this acetylcholine then reaches the receptor, which are located within the cell, the muscle wall. The muscle wall is called sarcolemma. So it has receptors there which receive this acetylcholine or the neurotransmitters. Here, as you see here, the acetylcholine, when it is released here, it is released in a great amount actually, and this causes an action potential to occur. And the action potential will stimulate or induce the release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So what will happen if you want to stop muscle contraction? That will need to stop the release of calcium as well. So then there is an acetylcholine esterase. This is an enzyme which breaks down the acetylcholine itself. As a result, now there is no more contraction to the muscle because there is no more release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So here, this figure presents that what happens after release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. We will recognize here, this is the sarcolemma, which is the membrane of the muscle cell or myofibrils, which are located within the muscle. And here there is the T-tubules, which are responsible to pass this signal. They pass this signal or this action potential to the net. This net is the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So now when any stimuli comes from a nerve, it goes to this cell wall where they reach receptors and then travel down through this T-tubule, which in turn will stimulate the release of calcium from this sarcoplasmic reticulum. And this calcium will then go and cause muscle contraction. Okay, so this is a summary of what I mentioned today. Here we find the nerve. Okay, this is a motor nerve. Here it is attached to the muscle fiber, and then at the end of the nerve you could recognize that there is synaptic. So here there are synaptic vesicles which contains acetylcholine. This is a neurotransmitters which will then be released when there is an action potential. They will be released and go to the receptor on the cell wall or on the muscle. Okay, so on the sarcolemma. This is a sarcolemma. Okay. So when these signals they go down, okay, here they go, the action potential here travel down through the T-tubule and reach the sarcoplasmic reticulum and then induce the release of calcium from it. Here is the sarcoplasmic reticulum and these are the T-tubules, okay? So it's just here magnification of this part. And calcium, when it is released, it then goes and binds to troponin in the myosin filament. We have actin filament and myosin filament. So troponin is located within actin filament, which is a thin filament. We will talk about them in details. I will talk about them next lesson in details. So that will cause the muscle to contract. Here is a relaxed form of the muscle. Here is a contracted form of the muscle. Those are the references that I used through this lesson. And here are my questions. I would like you to answer them, and please communicate with me through those sites. You could ask questions, leave a mini blog, or create a discussion with me, no problem, through my Twitter account or WordPress or YouTube. And if you like my lesson, please don't forget to thumb up. Thank you very much. I hope that you enjoyed this lesson. Okay, have a good day. Bye-bye.